Welcome to the Intentional Health for Women podcast. I'm your host, Garrett GQ Query. This podcast is dedicated to developing intentional health for women. Former 400-pound fat man turned health and fitness professional, specializing in women's health. In this podcast, you will find over a decade of experience in the health and fitness industry, serving women to become their most intentional self through strength training, nutrition, and lifestyle practices. Each week, we will dive into a variety of different topics, ranging from interviews with women leading the way in the health and fitness industry, client case studies throughout the years, myth busting, social media trends, female hormones, gut health, and so much more. We are not normal. We are intentional. Welcome to another episode of the Intentional Health for Women podcast. I'm your host, Garrett GQ Query, and I'm joined by my former co-host who started the show with me, Brittany Kohnke. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Feels weird to be like face to face doing this again.
Yeah. In a studio.
Yeah. I
rocking
like it.
out. Yeah. It's good times. So for those of you who do not know her, maybe haven't gone back to some of those episodes, we did do an episode telling stories, but today it's going to be the focus is on Brittany, her journey, and something maybe we didn't chat about on Getting to Know Us episode is in my, maybe this is my brain just forgetting, is like, what was like you childhood, like you were an athlete, like I guess I know that part, but like like walk me through childhood, high school.
Yeah, sure. So growing up, I played a variety of sports, softball, basketball, volleyball, track. My main sport was softball though. I was always that kid though that, I grew super fast. Not to get super personal here, I started my cycle when I was in fourth grade.
Sure.
I was the same height I am now in fourth grade. So
Yeah.
I grew very, very early on. And even though being very active, I was always just a little bit overweight. But activity was definitely something that, was a part of my life from the beginning.
Right.
So, and then after high school, I pursued a career in softball at college, played 2 years in college. And then when I transferred down to the University of Tampa, I decided that I no longer wanted to play softball anymore. I wanted to go into the fitness competition world. And I did my first figure competition back in 2005 at the ripe age of 20. So that then kind of started my journey as far as fitness and how I perceive fitness and health all the way to this day.
Yeah. Walk us through that. Like 20 years old, first fitness competition.
Yeah. So let me kind of lay the groundwork here. Let's go back to 2005. There's no Instagram. Facebook was just getting on the market. We were still like looking at things in forums, right? Getting like advice from that.
Bodybuilding.com.
Yeah. Right. So when I was competing, it was the typical, what we called then bro science, 5-6 meals a day, chicken, rice, veggie, oatmeal, 2 hours of fasted cardio, the whole 9 yards. Yeah. So you can imagine by the time I actually got to the stage, I was 110 pounds soaking wet. I was nothing.
And how tall are you again?
I'm 5'3".
Yeah.
Yeah. I walk around now at 140. So, I was a mess. But then afterwards, no one talked about how you come off of, stage prep, and that no one talked about, those girls that are in Oxygen magazine and Fitness RX, they don't look like that all year round.
Right.
And so that then, quickly I went into a very dark place, depression, eating disorder, binging and the whole 9 yards. And from the time I was 21 to I'd say probably 23, 24, it was just a mess a mess as far as my health. And I was trying to recreate a look that just was not possible. It was not.
It wasn't sustainable. You can't.
Exactly.
You can't. For those of you who are listening and maybe you aren't familiar with competing, you've never been around a competitor, is so many people over the years that are unaware of like what bodybuilding is and how that works leading into a show, is they're like, well, I don't want to look like that. And it's like, well, cool. You're not going to slip and fall into looking like people who are on a stage. It takes a lot of dedicated work in realistically controlled starving.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I guess maybe I was the anomaly. I wanted to look like that. Yeah. And now being 40, 20 years later, I realized that goal was in an attempt to fill a void within. And I'm not saying every competitor has that goal. Yeah. I definitely don't want to put that out there. But for me, there was definitely some self-esteem and ego things that, for sure, kind of drove me to that world. But I will say that entire experience definitely laid the groundwork of what the next 20 years would be and how.
How much of that was the need for control?
It was not only need for control, but for also validation.
Yeah.
I had a very successful career in softball. Mm-hmm. And when I made the decision to step away, like most athletes, especially female athletes, you're at this point where you're like, I've just dedicated my entire life to this identity.
Yep.
Now this identity is gone. I'm at a pivotal point in my life where I'm no longer at home. I'm on my own. Mm-hmm. I'm about to be an adult. Oh, shit. And for me, it was very easy to get wrapped up in another, striving for something, striving for a goal, striving for some sort of validation. Now, that's not to say I'm not super grateful for all of the lessons, but going back, and I would say this to any young girl right now, if you are not happy with yourself right now, don't go chasing some sort of fitness competition thinking it's going to, fill that void. Because I promise you it's going to make it 10 times worse.
Yeah. Because then you will forever and always compare yourself to stage lean.
Yeah. There is something, a lot of us who have competed, especially in those earlier days where we've competed in a way that was not like it is now, very, systematic, health first, things like that.
Well, parts of it.
Yes. Yes.
Some coaches, some parts of the
industry. Right. But I mean, like you've had competitors where you have, phased them in and you've cycled their diet and everything. And it's not this like 16-week crash course of starvation and then, get up on stage half naked and hope for the best.
Yeah.
A lot of us competitors that have been there before have talked about if we could go back, we would have never have done it.
100%.
Because like you said, it does have this visual in your mind of what you should look like. And because you can and have looked like that, to now be normal, it's hard. But I will say it's taken a lot of work. And I'm grateful that I can now see kind of through all of that, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
you compete in 2005. Did you compete again within the next couple of years?
No. Right after I competed, I ended up moving back home to Chicago.
Okay.
Found myself in the bars Thursday through Sunday.
Yeah. Good old Midwest.
Yeah. In the bars Thursday through Sunday. And then, Monday through Thursday at the gym for 3 to 4 hours. So it was just a constant roller coaster. And then really got into some dark places, like I said, probably till I was about 25. Slowly made my way out, but did not go back to the gym. I abstained from the gym till I was probably 29. And I didn't even go back to the gym. I started with walking, getting back into walking and doing a little bit of running. And a friend of mine then was like, maybe you should compete again. And I was like, maybe I can do it now. Maybe, So I competed again. This time, though, it was different. And I think it was just because my mindset was different and I kind of saw through it all. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, this was fun. I could say I did it, but it wasn't the same kind of experience for me.
Sure.
And then at that point, I knew I was like, I need to find something that keeps me healthy, gets me in the gym, but it's not tied to my looks. And a friend of mine at the time was like, why don't you try CrossFit? And that was when it was kind of like just starting to come out. I was like, all right, I'll try this thing. Did my first class and I was like, I really like this. There was like so much camaraderie. It didn't matter what I looked like everyone was cheering each other on, and I was super fortunate to be at a gym that was just using the CrossFit name. They did their own programming. So it was very well thought out, systematic, focused on strength, not a bunch of high intensity cardio or gymnastics movements.
Yeah.
So from there, I got hooked, and there was a gentleman at the gym who was a coach. He will forever be one of my mentors, even though, to this day, we don't really speak. He introduced me and 12 other women to barbell training. And we did this class Monday and Wednesday, Girls Gone Strong, where we learned how to squat, bench, and deadlift and some of the variations. And he adopted a West Side Barbell kind of esque program. And from there I was hooked and I was like, you know what? I think I want to do this thing called powerlifting. He was like, I think you should. I think you'd be really good at it.
Yeah.
And so I found a local meet and I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to go do it.
Yep.
Won my first meet, set some records. And then that was that. The next 10 years were dedicated.
Won some, set some records, no big deal.
Yeah.
Just rolls in, doesn't know what you're doing and set records. Yeah. Sounds about right.
Thank you, genetics.
Powerlifting. Okay. Set some records, 10 years.
Yeah.
How did that impact your journey throughout that time? Better relationship with food throughout it?
It completely changed my life.
Yeah.
Not only better relationship with food, better relationship with myself and my own self-worth. No longer was I being validated by what I saw in the mirror or, a panel of judges. It was, okay, this is the process. This is the goal. This is what I need to do day in and day out. And I'm competing against me. That was the one thing with powerlifting is I never saw
anyone
the
else.
List. I never knew who I was competing against. I didn't really give a shit, to be honest.
Right.
It was, okay, I have this number in mind. This is what I'm going to do. And this is what I'm going to hit. And so with that, I felt, I don't want to say for the first time because I felt very empowered when I was playing softball, but for the first time in a long time, I felt so empowered and I was driving the vehicle now. I was the one in charge and I said, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Like most competitors though, there were times where I went too far, where it was pushing through injuries and pushing through, oh, I can't hang out tonight or I can't do this or that because I got to train, and it I guess, sometimes you say you got to make sacrifices for that stuff. But looking back, I was like, for what? So it was kind of getting back again into that. What am I trying to validate? What am I trying to prove? And I really noticed that towards the end of my career, especially the last meet I did, which was post-COVID, where I look and I'm like, what is this all for? Why do I have to prove anything? I already proved things to myself. And I think that's kind of where I'm at now with my health and fitness journey is, what am I trying to prove? What are we all trying to prove? I don't know. It's just different now.
You've known me for a minute. I think the competitions can be great to give you a framework to go after something. But at the end of the day, like, I think what I try to model in my company and what I teach and coach is like, we're training for life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're training to be amazing spouses. We're training to be amazing parents. We're training to be amazing children to our parents and show up as our best self. And that discipline and framework can provide so much value to every avenue of your life. And I think that competing can be a great tool to build the structure, give you a goal. But I think, like you said, eventually there comes a day where you wake up and you're like, okay, cool. Like, I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone anymore. Yeah. I'm doing this because I just want to show up as the best version of myself with a full cup so I can pour into those people that I care about the most.
Yeah. And I think I realized that so I competed in 2019 at Nationals. That was the biggest meet of my life. I had prepared 2 years for that meet.
Yeah.
And even though I did well, there was a part of it where I felt like, if I could go back, I wish I would have done this, this, and this, right? So then go into the next year, 2020, I already had it in my mind, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to come back stronger. Well, everyone knows 2020, COVID shut down everything and like derailed everything. So really took some time just away from the sport in general. And when you take time away, you start to really kind of reflect on it. Yeah. And you start to think, why am I doing this? Mm-hmm. What is the point? Life happened as well. I got in a relationship. I ended up, moving and then moving back and buying a gym and all of this stuff. And so by the time I did get back on the platform in 2023, I was a different person. I was a much different person. And I was a different person from in the regards of how I looked at things, and I found myself at that last prep, not only getting more injured, even though I was the most experienced I had been, but it just felt different. And I also, looking back, see my body was different because my body was starting to go through the stress and the effects of things to come. And so I think too, it was also, that last meet, looking back now, and I don't think I've ever said this out loud, I think that was the start of my next journey.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it back then. I just kind of looked at it. It was like, oh, I'm done with powerlifting. Like that, hang that one up. I'm good.
We've worked a lot on this, right? Like we've consulted on this, labs, etc. That was the beginning of ending of powerlifting, because at the time that was the match that came in and lit the fire inside of your body and basically said, hey, you need to remove your implants.
Yeah. So let's back up a bit. Yeah. After I got COVID in the summer of 2020, like many of us, it was no different.
Yeah.
After getting COVID, I started to see how after I would train, I would get some pretty severe swelling that wouldn't go away.
Real quick, let's rewind even a little bit more, because I don't know this. When did you have your implants done?
I got my implants in 2014.
Okay, so you basically half of your powerlifting career you had them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, was it 2014 or 2013? It was 2013 because it would have been 10 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was also at that point where I was like, okay, either I need to replace them or take them out. Yeah. So back to 2020, after I would train, especially any sort of heavy leg day, my legs would swell to the point of not being able to fit into pants.
Yeah.
And I started to think, okay, well, this is kind of weird. And then it kind of just naturally, where I was like, all right, maybe this is the time where I just dial back on training, whatever. So that kind of went back and forth for a little bit, a couple of years. And when I decided to go back into training for powerlifting, then I started to see not only the swelling come back, but just an ungodly amount of fatigue. What else was I experiencing? I mean, mood swings, like almost like perimenopause, PMS type mood swings. That again, I kind of attributed to, well, I'm getting older. Maybe it's just my cycle. Like I'm getting to that point.
Because how old are you again?
I just turned 40.
For reference, for those of you who may not know, is typically perimenopause begins around 50.
But remember, I was looking at it, okay, I started my period in 4th grade. I was 9. Fair. Maybe I'm one of the early ones. Right. Again, probably more so I didn't want to believe it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to believe it could be that. And I didn't want to believe it was some other things in my life.
And why, like, if you're comfortable going there, like, why is that? Like, how much did those implants mean to you?
When you have something a part of you for a decade, it becomes an identity, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, I was a teacher for 12 years, but I was also in the fitness industry for many years. Mm-hmm. And, you know, did some modeling, did some things, and you equate that. If you're a lean person in the fitness industry, you probably have implants too.
Yeah.
And so again, I was coming up to this point in my life where I'm like, an identity is starting to strip away. Holy shit, I'm not ready for this. Like, I had just gotten everything I thought I wanted. You know, I was in a healthy, loving relationship, just purchased a gym. All of these dreams were coming true. So I thought, and then now it's being shown to me that I need to strip it away.
Yeah.
And what I realized was those dreams and those things, like the implants, were rooted in things that were not authentic to me. And anytime you have something that's not authentic, it won't last.
No.
So that meet was the start of it. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you know, I decided, I think it was a month or two after that meet, I was going to go to this women's retreat, and we did plant medicine.
Okay.
And during that time, it was another opportunity to strip away what no longer was. I went into that plant medicine ceremony asking the medicine, please strip away anything that's not for my best and highest good. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that came to me after that was, I no longer want to be this fitness coach. I no longer want to be this power lifter.
Yeah.
But with that, it was kind of like, then who am I? What am I? Again, it's funny how life works, because if you think, that happened 20 years ago too, when I decided to hang up my cleats.
Yep.
Now what? Okay. So that ceremony was in May of 23. Pretty much from May until November of 24, my entire life changed. Removed myself from the fitness industry, took my implants out, broke off an engagement. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Circling back to the identity conversation, like, I think that's where people really get caught up. Like, I feel like some people can really miss the boat in they can, I feel like when you're forced to have an identity shift, because a lot of times, like when an identity shift is coming, I feel like you kind of come to a proverbial fork in the road. And like you can choose to accept the identity shift and move forward and like do it willingly. Mm-hmm. Or you can continue like essentially I feel like you reach a point and like you're offered an exit of like, hey, it's time to change. We need to exit and we need to go. Or we can be stubborn and choose to stay on the road until you finally hit a brick wall and it says, hey, we done.
Right.
This ain't happening anymore.
Right.
And I feel like that's where a lot of people can get really like stuck and like life is happening to me, not for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can have like this existential crisis and like some people never recover. Like they just become kind of shells of themselves. They can't ever accept that that identity isn't what is meant for them moving forward. Yeah. And I feel like what's interesting about the society and culture that we live in today, especially like even here, like this podcast, even like what I've built up until this point, there is going to come a day where most likely my identity and things in my life are going to shift and evolve and grow into a new season. And something that's very interesting from my perspective of social media is a lot of times people, because it's basically like reality TV, people get attached to that version and identity of you. And they think that they know you. They think that they're a part of your life. And when you go through those changes, they don't see the day-to-day. They don't see the innate evolution. And when you do finally, like to them, it's like a flip of a switch. When in all reality, it's been building for years to evolve into this next version of you.
Right. And
when that is stripped away, people freak out. Yeah. An example, I have a friend that I grew up with. She built herself up within this like multi-level marketing brand for many years. And coinciding with that identity, she also had purchased a Jeep and did all of these things to the Jeep and became a huge influencer within the Jeep community.
Yeah.
And when she left the multi-level marketing company and within probably a year to 18 months, left the Jeep community and bought her first Mercedes, she had thousands of her followers like lose their fucking minds.
Yeah.
Because like they were so like attached to this person and identity of like Jeep life, Jeep culture, blah, blah, blah. When she evolved, they just couldn't take it and like freaked out.
Yeah. I want to circle back to something you said that has really helped me through this season of change. Two things. One is, especially for women, so if you don't hear anything other than this, women, hear this. It always starts as a whisper.
Mm-hmm.
That whisper, especially a woman's intuition, it starts as a whisper, and the more you try to like push it away, it gets louder and louder until you can't not hear it.
Yeah. And
I think in my case, there were several whispers, but one of them was the implants. The implants. And I want to say it was not a whisper of like how many of these women become sick from their implants, right? I mean, it's a legitimate breast implant illness is a legitimate thing. Mm-hmm. For me, it was more of a whisper of these are no longer serving you. This is no longer your identity. Mm-hmm. You no longer have to, have these things over your heart. Your heart is an organ of love and all of that, and you're blocking it.
Yeah.
You're blocking it. And, some people might see that as woo-woo and spiritual, but that was what was coming through for me.
Sure.
And the other thing that you talked about was, life is always happening for me, even, the last few months for me have been some of the most difficult and heart-wrenching and humiliating. But one of the things that I thank my lucky stars of is that I always have found a perspective of, okay, this is happening for me. Something better's coming. I might not know it right now, but having that faith and that optimism, and maybe it's, an ignorance in a sense, but having that optimism of knowing, okay, someone upstairs was looking out for me because something better's coming. And someone upstairs knew the person and the people I were surrounded with were not for my highest good.
Yeah.
And so they needed to remove them.
Yeah.
And they knew I wasn't going to do it.
Right.
So they had to do it in the worst way possible.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are going through a very transitional season right now. And often when we go through transitions, one of the things that will be affected is our health, whether it's our physical health, emotional health, mental health, whatever. The body, I believe, the body will always respond before the mind. The body will show you things before the mind wants to actually perceive it as happening. And for me, that's what was happening. Hypothyroid.
Yep.
Messed up hormones.
Yep.
All of these things, weight gain, all of these things were happening, and I didn't understand why. I didn't understand as someone who had just literally perfected her journey, had not only the perfect body, so to speak, but could perform well. And now I'm doing all of the same things and it's not working. It's not working because other things in my life were not working.
Well, yeah, because it's we talked on this a couple episodes ago with a mentor of mine, Luke, and I may have told you this before, like in our consultations, is like, there's a stress bucket. Like you have basically like a 5-gallon pail. And you only get so much stress before it starts pouring over.
Right. That one drop, what's that one drop going to be until the bucket falls? That one drop could have been one of the earlier drops and you didn't even notice.
Yeah.
But now that the bucket's full, that same drop, and that was exactly what was happening. My training used to be something that would not faze me. And now I'm training a quarter of the time and it's fazing me.
Yeah.
I'm doing the same things with my diet. Didn't faze me before, but now it does. I think often this kind of goes back. We are cyclical beings. We should be evolving and changing. If we're doing the same things over and over, even though they may have worked 5-10 years ago, that doesn't mean they're going to work now. And I think the more that we can keep an open mind, especially as women, what worked in your 20s, maybe even your 30s, is not going to work in your 40s. Definitely not going to work in your 50s.
No. Because like, let's go there. Like it's talk about how that relationship like impacted how much of your bucket it filled, like with stress, like because it's just going to put it into perspective for so many women of like, there's women out there going through it right now. And it's like in when a relationship is no longer serving you, and like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of other life factors that can impact the amount of training that you can withstand.
Right.
And that is why there is seasonality to training. And that's why having a coach is extremely valuable to understand where you're at, give you the amount of training and training volume that you can handle during that season. But there will come a point, and if you are in a relationship that is not serving you, realistically, you probably shouldn't be training. Like, it's not.
I will forever be incredibly grateful to the coach that I had during that last powerlifting prep.
Okay.
Paul Ned. He was amazing, listened to everything I said as far as how I was feeling. He scaled things back. But I think he and I, because obviously I'm very knowledgeable, I used to coach myself.
Yeah.
He and I were overlooking the relationship factor.
Yep.
We were looking at things from a different perspective. And, you know, my purpose for coming on here today is not to, you know, like shun or poo-poo my relationship.
No.
There was many things that, you know, I'm very thankful for in that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But that relationship showed me when you stay quiet, when you put your needs on the back burner in order to avoid conflict, and when you try to do everything, these are the consequences. You know, with that relationship, I was wearing two hats or trying to wear two hats.
Yeah.
I was trying to make things work from a life perspective, but then also carry two people forward. And it was at my own demise.
Well, because you're not asking for, you've foregone asking for your needs to be met.
Right.
It's self-abandonment at its highest form.
Exactly. And I think, you know, I don't want to poo-poo this movement either, but this whole like boss babe movement, that was the start of it.
Oh, we can poo-poo on that. I will gladly.
Yeah. I mean,
you know how I feel about this.
Yeah. I was there.
Yep.
I was there. And I have to give it to my former partner. I showed up into that relationship as that person.
100%.
And so, again, going into a relationship where I'm a boss babe, I'm going to do everything, I'm going to conquer the world, and then halfway through saying, no, I don't want to do everything. I need help.
Yeah.
That was that. But I think that movement is now the start of what we're seeing in women's health. Women are stressed out of their minds, trying to be every single role there is. And you said it best, self-abandoning. And, you know, when even we look at it from a perspective of, you know, why are women gaining fat? Fat is protective. Fat is always going to protect the body. So if you're trying to protect something, I mean, the body's going to react in that way. But going back to, you know, the whole boss babe movement, I think where we got it wrong is that we thought, okay, in order to be empowered women, we have to do it all. When in reality, an empowered woman is standing in her womanhood and saying, I can do everything, but I don't have to. It's okay to have help.
Yep.
It's okay to have seasons, cycles. I mean, a woman's cycle is different than a man's cycle.
Yep.
I mean, that's nature right there.
Yeah.
And so why are we fighting nature? So kind of circling back to my story, once I started to put those pieces together, everything shifted. And it was like that.
Yeah.
I mean, within 4 months, my entire health has changed from, you know, now knowing where I'm at from a hormone and a thyroid perspective, eliminating people and things that are no longer serving me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even try. Well, I mean, I tried. Like, I obviously had to do something, but
yeah.
I'm not dieting, you know, obsessively or training, none of it. And I think it just goes to show health is a lot more than macros and strength training. I will always say this. Those pieces of my journey, whether it was competing in figure or powerlifting, they definitely laid a foundation that I can't overlook and I can't disregard. However, and I want to especially talk to the women, if you're doing all of the things, but some of the things over here that may seem a little out there and woo-woo, if you're disregarding those, you might want to look at those.
Yep.
Because it's a balancing act, right? You've got to do the work, but then also do the other work.
Yeah. It can't be ignored. Like that's if there's any takeaway from this episode is I hope it holds up the mirror for you to recognize like, okay, cool. You hit your steps.
Yeah.
You strength train 3 to 4 days a week. You hit your nutrition and yet it's the same nutrition and yet for some reason you've gained 10 pounds.
Right. Right. And that's where I think having a coach like you or any other coach that sees that big picture, it's not just, this side of the equation. Having a coach that can see both sides is invaluable because I don't think enough people right now are talking about the other side. Because it's easy to say, here's your meal plan and here's your strength training plan. Hit your steps. It's not easy to have a conversation of like, well, let's talk about your relationship. Let's talk about the stress in your life. Let's talk about the fact that you're unhappy with your life. Because those are hard conversations.
I think one of the unique experiences that I've had dating this year is seeing like boss babe culture, like front row seats. And seeing it not having like wreaked its full havoc on someone's life. And like, as a man, like having this like intuition and feeling of like, oh, like recognizing like this underlying subconscious tone of like, oh, you're hitting it. Like you're hitting burnout. You don't like this. You're not happy, but you haven't consciously recognized what's happening.
Yeah.
You haven't consciously recognized what's happening in the implications that it's having on you and your body. And it's like, it's one of those things. It's like, it's not my place to say anything.
Right. And I'll be the first to admit we've known each other for some time.
Mm-hmm.
Had you said something,
oh yeah,
I would have shunned you off.
Told me to fuck off.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't have listened.
Yeah.
It's like anything though. You've got to be ready to hear it.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes we have to roll down that road until we hit the brick wall.
Yeah. Always starts as a whisper. Yeah, I mean, I think I will say, I think more women are starting to talk about it, especially women that have or are going through it. They're starting to see, wait a minute, I was sold this lie. I was sold I got to do X, Y, and Z. I've got to be this, this, this. I got there, and now what? I'm unhappy. I'm unhealthy. Completely abandoned myself for what?
Yeah, because a lot of times, right? Like a lot of times too, depending upon age, like you wake up one day and you're like, oh shit, like I want to be a wife and I want kids.
Yeah.
And I've completely self-abandoned for, let's just say like you become quote unquote boss babe at 27 years old. You wake up at 33 and you're like, oh fuck, I want to be married and I want to have kids. But my internal clock is ticking too.
Yeah.
What am I going to do?
Right. Or I'm trying to have kids and I can't. Why? Why can't I have kids?
Yeah.
I'm doing all of the things. Are you? Or is that the problem? You're doing all of the things.
You're doing all of the things.
I have to give a huge shout out to my friend Jennifer. She showed me, I wish I knew the source so I could cite that too, but she showed me a very powerful Instagram post that was like, from a man's perspective, you can't expect a woman to be a wife and bring home a 7-figure salary. You can't expect a woman, or he said, you can't expect a woman to be raising a family and managing a household and bringing home a 7-figure salary. And he just kind of went down the dichotomy of it sometimes needs to be one or the other.
Right.
And that's okay. We don't have to be all of it.
Yeah. But I think to that point, like from a man's perspective is like, I talk about this a lot, is I think women don't understand the amount of power that they hold, that if they provide the support and the support, the safe place for a man to come home and lay down his armor, that man, most men will go to war for you and they will go out and make the 7 figures or whatever it is to provide and protect because you're their safe place.
Right.
And I think that something that's been lost is if you're out here being this boss babe, you're making decisions all day, every day, you're queen bee, are you really going to be able to come home and like soften and nurture that relationship in your highest like femininity?
No.
Like, are you going to be able to do that? And it's not to say that women can't go out and make 6 figures and a really good amount of money and contribute to the household and have aspirations. But I think like anything, whether it be training, like life, nutrition, there are seasons.
Yeah.
And so maybe you meet someone and you really sit down and you have a lot of hard conversations with this partner that you might want to build a life with and get married, and be like, okay, well, like you're going to do your thing. I'm going to do my thing and I'm going to work very hard at it, become good at it, be proficient. I'm going to support you and love you. And then like, what is that, like having that discussion? I think it's super important having the discussion of like, okay, what does the first 5 years of our kid's life look like? Mm-hmm. Maybe I am going to step back in my current role and maybe work a little bit less. Can you step up and provide and protect the quality of life that we currently enjoy with children, et cetera? And then again, like that's another discussion down the road of like, okay, from 5 to now they're in school, from 5 to 10, hey, I'm going to step back into this role and I'm going to continue to help and contribute and in all of those things. Like, I think like a lot of people, I recently had a conversation is like how different dating in your 30s is versus 20s. Like it's a lot of times, like if you've done some work on yourself, like when you get into your 30s, it's no longer this enamoredness in like, let's just go around and do fun things and take trips and blah, 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 and take these pictures for Instagram of like, ooh, look at me and look at how happy I am. It's like you sit down and you're like, okay, where are you at? Where are you going? What's your values? Do we align? Like,
yeah, I think in your 30s, and I'd probably say now as I'm entering my 40s, you definitely are more adept to have those conversations of being direct.
Yeah.
What do you want? What are your values? X, Y, and Z. I think for a lot of women, we get into a situation where, I don't want to generalize, so maybe I should just say I got in a situation where I was willing to overlook values, wants, and desires in order to appease or keep the peace. Whereas I think when you have been a woman that's been through stuff, you say, if it's not a hell yeah, nope, this is what I want. This is what I'm willing to compromise on. This is what I'm not willing to compromise on. And so be it.
And the other thing is, if it's a neutral, more often than not, it's going to wind up a no.
Exactly. There is something to be said about a gut reaction and a gut instinct.
Yeah.
And if you overlook it, eventually it'll bite you in the ass.
Yeah.
But I think too, a lot more women, and I'll say men, we're just getting to this point in society, in our life, where we're not afraid of saying what we want. And sometimes wants are different, and that's okay. What's not okay is not being honest and direct about it.
Yeah.
To both the other person, but yourself.
Yeah.
As well. So. Maybe we should have like a relationship podcast. Dating in your 30s, dating in your 40s.
I mean, it comes up just. There's a colleague out in North Carolina. He made a post the other day, and he was talking about, and I know you'll appreciate this, is he's like, the number one thing that I deal with that most coaches aren't willing to talk about as a male coach to females is a unsupportive husband.
And I don't want to break your train of thought, but let me put a little caveat on it. A woman who knows they're not supportive. So it may not be direct or blatant, but as a woman, you know if your man is supportive or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave it at that.
And if this, like, the one thing that I can say about this briefly is fellas, women are different. They can't just like rub some fucking dirt on it and just keep going.
Yeah.
And realistically, neither can you.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, health isn't just macros, strength training, sleep, movement. The biggest thing that gets left out in that category is community and relationships. And if you don't have those things, good luck.
It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So a basic human need. To feel belonging, to feel love, to feel safety, to feel nurture. If you don't feel that, nothing else matters. And I'm going to go on the record here and say, next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see more people talking about the influence of that stuff, the influence of feeling nurtured, of feeling safe. You can't out-diet or out-train not feeling safe.
Nope.
Trust me, you can't.
Been there, tried it.
Yep. So we can create the best laid plans we want. If we don't feel safe, doesn't matter.
Yeah. You know my story and my background. I almost dealt with something kind of in a way identical to you, is like, when I finally treated my thyroid, And now don't get me wrong. I went into an intentional deficit.
Sure.
I dropped like 30 pounds in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It was the easiest diet of my life.
Right. And I will never forget, we also had a conversation, and you were telling me a story about your past. I asked you, what are you not speaking up about? The thyroid is your voice. You speak. And it was like that light bulb went off for you. Were like, oh shit. Yeah. Same thing with me. What was I not speaking up about?
Yeah. I mean, I had a client not just recently. We were able to accomplish a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an inkling, right? Like, you know me, like I'm very much so like an empath, like I can feel things, but like as a male coach, like there's lines. And you learn how to walk that tightrope. Mm-hmm. And I would poke and prod very politely. Hey, I noticed this. Oh, it's nothing. I'm referring to my past. Okay. And then it finally comes out. And I'm just like, if there's one thing that I can tell you, if you're a client and you have a coach, and you have a good coach who cares, let her buck. Like just let it out.
Yeah.
Because we can give you all the protocols, all the walking, all the nutrition adjustments under the sun, the supplements, etc. But I can't out strength train, out supplement, out gut protocol a bad relationship.
Yeah. And that's why I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see coaches such as yourself and those that, I don't want to say it's an innate skill. I mean, it is, but it isn't. That skill of knowing which questions to ask and which things to poke at that are going to be, heavy hitters. I just had a conversation with a friend the other day. She's in prep. She's having some digestive issues. And I point blank asked her, what kind of shit are you holding on to? What are you not getting rid of? I'm like, stop seeing yourself as that person from 20 years ago. It's like a light bulb went off. Mm-hmm. So again, it's that connection. It's that connection to the unseen.
Yeah.
You can't disregard the seen, the protocols, all that. But sometimes it's the unseen that
for sure
have a lot of power.
Yeah. So how I wrap up the show now, this was an idea from a mentor who I was fortunate enough to have sit in on the podcast a couple months ago, is how are you living your life intentionally in this season?
Being unapologetic and authentically me. I have stripped everything away that was no longer me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going into this next season, especially now, just turning 40, into the next decade, like I'm living my best life and I'm doing it on my terms. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. If this episode brought you value, please subscribe, share with a friend, and leave us a review. We are not normal. We are intentional.